You can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham.
America's got to wake up. This economy, if it doesn't create good, sustainable jobs for people, it's going to continue to feed the very division, despair, and disparity that's taking place and driving this country apart.
United Food and Commercial Workers President Mark Perrone. Nearly 90,000 U.S. retail workers lost their jobs since October of 2016. Brick and mortar general merchandise store jobs were hit the hardest as more people order those goods online. Perrone says that what happens to these and other workers on the job-losing side of new technology habits isn't just a tech issue. It's a working-class social justice question that goes to the heart of the kind of society Americans want.
And we have to make a decision. What kind of society do we want? Do we want a society that only a handful can pay their bills, can go to the doctor, can provide education to their children? What are we supposed to say? Let them eat cake?
Perrone says as technology changes, making life more convenient for many, it's important to make sure that workers' needs are met, regardless of the technological advances. Perrone says the UFCW wants workers to get the respect and the rewards we deserve for the very essential contributions we make.
It's not so great that the group that's out there doing the work every single day is considered to be the bottom of the totem pole, and the ownership class that owns the stock should be the ones that ultimately receive all the benefit in society. United Food and Commercial Workers believes that we need to ultimately improve the lives of hardworking men and women in America.
The Fix LA Coalition is calling on city department heads to fulfill Mayor Eric Garcetti's promise to create 5,000 new jobs to restore city services. Budget hearings are underway for Los Angeles. The Fix LA Coalition, which includes labor unions, says the budget cuts that cost jobs mean unreasonable 911 emergency wait times, neglected trash, potholes, and broken sidewalks, among other issues. There are also hundreds of pending city employee retirements in Los Angeles. The Fix LA Coalition says targeted local hire was a key program to the pledge to create 5,000 new jobs. The failure to hire anywhere near 5,000 people calls into question the city's real commitment to the targeted local hire program, which is supposed to hire people living in disadvantaged communities. WIN is brought to you in part by the Amalgamated Transit Union, the largest labor union representing transit and allied workers in the U.S. and Canada. Online at atu.org. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you?
Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Explosion Day. Yeah, today's the day. 2010, the Deepwater Horizon went boom 11 workers killed, and a major catastrophe, probably the largest environmental disaster in the history of the United States. And hey, happy anniversary. Also this week, if you remember, on Sunday was the anniversary of the West Texas explosion that killed, I think it was 15 workers and first responders. And, who could have known? Who could have known, putting extremely flammable, combustible material in wooden crates in a wooden shed with no sprinkler system in the Texas heat could be a bad thing? Who could have known that? God, when you have no regulations, you have no oversight. That's what you get. So we're going to talk a little bit about that stuff today, but also more importantly, the idea that we, the people, you, me, us, we run this country, not the handfuls that occupy the elected offices. And, well, if you look at Donald Trump, lost by 3 million votes, and you got to remember that. While he won the Electoral College, lost by 3 million votes. Now, I understand the big news today was that it appears that there's a deal having been hammered out with the Freedom Caucus and the Tuesday Group that is going to move forward with the repeal and replace of health care. And again, you've got to understand where the Republican mindset is. And it's very simple. And I'm stuck thinking about all the people who are going to get screwed over by this, all the people who are going to be harmed, all of the people who will no longer be able to afford even the not so great insurance that comes with the ACA. Now, these aren't Cadillac plans. These are bare bones, bare necessity, catastrophic kind of plans to where if you get really sick, you might not go bankrupt immediately. It's something as opposed to absolutely nothing. And as I've said, I'm in favor of it. It's a good first step. We should be moving forward, not backward. And where the Republicans want to take us is backward, and really just really far backward. Back to the good old days of pay or die. And it comes out with where they think that they've come to common ground. One of the things we've talked about on the program is this community rating system. And there was the idea that, basic insurance pooling, everybody's in, which lowers the costs on the really, really sick, but raises the cost on the healthy today, knowing that the healthy today are going to be sick at some point tomorrow, and that this large pooling will take care of everybody. And that, when you're younger and a little healthier, you're going to pay a touch more. When you get to be older and a little sicker, you're going to pay a touch less. It's about leveling out and making sure that, the really, really sick people can get the coverage they need so that they don't, just die. Now, understand, the Republican ideology is just die. Because if you can't reach deep enough into your pocket, if you're not fortunate enough or wealthy enough to be able to afford just outrageous premiums, then shame on you. There's the curb. Good luck. Maybe we'll come by and sweep you up in the next street sweeping. Maybe. So they think they've come to an agreement to give states, and I love this. We're going to give the states the chance to have waivers to these community ratings programs. And immediately when I hear this, I go, well, we're going states. States are going to have. I'm thinking it's all the crazy states. The right-wing states are all going to, the Trump voters. And there's some poetic justice maybe in that. But I take no solace in knowing that it's going to be the least among us who are going to be harmed the most. Which again, back to, Republican ideology. Hooray for me, and the hell with everybody else. And this is what we're seeing play out right before us. And the fact that they didn't have a replacement plan that was palatable to anyone is kind of indicative of their ideology. It's about the handfuls. It's about the wealthy. It's about, no, I don't want to have to pay for anything. And we should be giving tax cuts to those very wealthy. The beauty of Obamacare. And, look, I have problems with it. I've had problems with it from the beginning. But the beauty of it is that it was paid for. It didn't cost taxpayers a dime. Didn't cost the middle class anything. Didn't cost working people a dime. It was paid for by taxes on the very wealthy and on big corporations. kind of what we should be doing to fund the country, kind of what we used to do, because it makes sense on a certain level to have a tax code that says we go after the people and have the people who have all the money help contribute to how they made it all. Instead of saying that, to the victor goes the spoils and screw you working people, maybe just a thought, leave a couple of crumbs for people to, so maybe they don't have to fight over them. Maybe a little tug of war, not so much bloody knuckles, but maybe a little tug of war. Not in GOP land. And again, we come back to this Hunger Games mentality. It's the Hunger Games of healthcare, the Hunger Games of education. You name it, that's what it's become. And back to that, hooray for us, hooray for the winners, and the heck with all of you losers. And we've got a president who will tell you that. You're all losers. Now, again, I come back to this very simple point. The fact that this was the negotiating point. This was the sticking point. The fact that if you have this is the new world. Understand this. So if women, if you've had any children, or maybe at some point going to have some children, that could be a pre-existing condition. If you've been sick at all, welcome back rescission. Welcome back. Sorry, no insurance for you. Or welcome back. Hooray. It's going to be 5, 10, 15 times what it would have been had we left this rule in place. And how many people can afford that? So the other part of this, now understand, in this country, not yet, we don't say if you go to the hospital and you don't have insurance, get out. We don't do that yet. It's coming, but we don't do it yet. As a country, we've said that if you're having a heart attack and you don't have insurance, we will save your life. Now, you won't get long-term care, and you won't get, all of the preventative stuff to help you from not having another heart attack. None of that. You're not going to get any of that aftercare, but we'll save your life at that moment and then push you out into the street. For now, I do expect a piece of legislation at some point that says if you can't afford it, if you don't have the insurance, the hospitals don't have to take you. And maybe they'll set up a free clinic like we used to do in the old days, a poorhouse kind of clinic where you'll go and be warehoused until, because the highfalutin people don't want to see us dying in the streets. I'm sure they'll give us a warehouse to go and die in. So this is coming. This is on the horizon because, look, at the end of the day, Republicans have to do something. They have to have something to repeal and replace, even if it's worse. Even if it is horrible for the people who voted for them, because the people who voted for them wanted repeal and replace, because they were sold the idea that something better was coming. And you know what's coming, especially for the religious people? You get to go to the life after. You get to see what's beyond, what's in the beyond, and you're going to probably get to see that much sooner than you would have had you had health care. And you wonder why people are rising up. You wonder why there's organizing going on across this country. Because there are those of us who look at this and go, this is insane. This is just flat out nuts in the wealthiest country, not just in the world, but in the history of the world. This is the plan. This is what they want to bring us. And they do it with a straight face. These are people who went to a town hall and said, yep, that's what we're doing. Yep, we know poor people voted for us. Screw them. Going to be an interesting couple of days. Now, we'll see where this goes as the right-wing extremist, not enough pain and misery Freedom Caucus and the supposedly more moderate Tuesday group. It'll be interesting to see what they come out with. But this was the key bargaining chip, getting rid of those community ratings provisions. Yeah, fun. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425, or you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. When we come back, the Resistance Party going to be here talking about what we should be doing, what they're doing, and what this movement is about. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
All of my life I have searched for clarity. I have wrestled with two paths buried deep inside of me. I lost some rounds, been knocked around, felt my share of defeat. Yet somehow I've always managed to get back on my feet.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1853. That was the day that Harriet Tubman led her first trip on the Underground Railroad, the clandestine network that helped enslaved people escape slavery and move north to freedom. One of the most remembered conductors on the railroad, Tubman herself escaped slavery in eastern Maryland. Tubman had been forced to work in the fields, performing back-breaking labor under a brutal overseer. As a girl, Tubman was injured when she was hit in the head by a weight thrown by an overseer. The injury plagued her with headaches and visions that Tubman attributed as signs from God. To escape these harsh conditions, Tubman had to leave her family behind. But she did not forget them. On her first trip to free those enslaved, the group included her sister and 2 children. On subsequent trips, she helped lead her brother and aged parents to freedom. In all, Tubman made 19 trips back to the South. She became known as Moses, leading her people out of bondage. These journeys came at a personal risk for Tubman. Enraged Southerners placed a $40,000 bounty on her head. But Tubman was known to say that she never lost a single passenger. The Civil War did not stop Tubman's bravery. She worked as a cook, a nurse, and even a spy for the Union Army. The renowned abolitionist Frederick Douglass wrote a letter for Tubman where he wrote, quote, "The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witnesses of your devotion to freedom and of your heroism." The horrors of the slave labor system ended in the United States because of the courage of those like Harriet Tubman who risked their lives to stand up against injustice. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, Bill O'Reilly out. Who would have thunk it? I got to be honest, I was not one. I thought he was almost, I thought he was the Teflon Don there. But you know what? This shows what the power of we the people can do. The pressure overwhelming. The advertisers fleeing. At the end of the day, it really is about the dollars and cents. But again, I chalk this up as a victory for the resistance, for we the people, for people getting active, involved, engaged, and loud. I'm here to talk a little bit about what the resistance is. I've got Resistance Party Communications Director Andy Spears on the line. Andy, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it.
So I'm looking at this big victory, right?
It's absolutely a big victory. Like you, I never thought it would happen. I thought that O'Reilly would stay around. He has a track record of sexual harassment and kind of survived every time. And so this is definitely a victory. I think it's because people are paying attention. Advertisers are pulling out because people are saying they're putting pressure on them. And you can't be part of someone like Bill O'Reilly with his record.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I was surprised that this time mattered. I mean, because I've been joking about falafel and loofah sponges for a long time.
Yeah, no, it's pretty hilarious, and I think what matters this time is people are so engaged and so upset, and so enraged by the president that they put pressure on the big money advertisers, and that's what makes the difference.
And the thing is we've got this growing grassroots movement going on that some have compared to the Tea Party, Andy, and I don't know that that's a fair comparison.
Well, I mean, I think in one sense, I mean, there's definitely a sense of maybe shock and outrage. I know that the Tea Party. I think the difference is we live in reality, and the Tea Party's reality is vastly different. So they live in the alternative facts universe, and so you're seeing things like what happened in Georgia this week, what happened in Kansas. People are on the ground building. The other thing that happened with the Tea Party is they were pretty quickly co-opted by people like Dick Armey and the Koch brothers. This is still largely, if you look at the Indivisible movement and our movement, the Resistance Party, and other places, this is largely a grassroots, small dollar, sweat equity type of movement, and that separates us from the Tea Party as well.
And as you pointed out, not co-opted yet by the big money, and not that I know that there's any big money on the left to co-opt it.
Yeah, if you could point me to the big money, that'd be great. But there's always this big myth that George Soros is paying for everything, which is absolutely not true. And even when you look at the amount of money labor unions have compared to big business, the insurance companies, chambers of commerce, it's tiny in comparison. So
yeah, I'd burn their money. But here's the thing, just to have theirs. But here's the thing, I'm still waiting for my check in the mail. I'm waiting for my Soros check. When am I getting it?
We do demonstrations in Nashville every week at Senator Alexander and Corker's office, and people come and yell at us and talk to us about being paid protesters. And like you, I'm waiting to get that check because I'm just taking time off work to go do something that's really important.
And that's an important thing right there that you pointed out, that people have the ability to take off some time from work. And this is where I come back to my view that it always comes back to the economy. It always comes back to having power on the job, which is why I'm such a strong supporter of labor unions in this country, so that you have a piece of the economic pie and a voice and the ability to participate in something wonderful like our democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the union movement, I think, is also seeing a resurgence. Again, where I am, we're seeing the SEIU take a leadership role in politics with school employees and others, but they're seeing a resurgence in interest in membership because people want to get involved, and they value that ability to have both access to benefits, access to paid time off, and the ability to get engaged in the political process. That's really important.
Now, we're told, though, Andy, that the unions are dead in the South. There's no union in the South.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely not true. There was actually, even a year ago, before Donald Trump became president, there was a victory at a parts provider for Volkswagen. So it's one of the very first foreign-owned auto plants in the South to be unionized. Was right in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So that's happening. The UAW definitely has a strong presence here at the GM plant. And like I said, in Nashville, the SEIU is doing great with both city employees, school employees, and more and more interest in, hey, can I join a union? Can we unionize, our hospital or nursing home or whatever? And so because people want those benefits, so what we're seeing on the ground is a resurgence.
And it's something much needed, something I've been calling for years. But here's the thing, I've seen a lot online about the resistance, and it's kind of this idea more than it is, I think, an actual physical thing. You're trying to move this into a party. Is this, you're trying to make a political, like a third party out of this? What's the view? What's the goal here?
Yeah, I mean, we call ourselves a resistance party. Our goal is to work within the Democratic Party and keep them progressive, keep them connected to the working people. I think no one can argue with the fact that November 8th was kind of a disaster for the Democratic Party, not just at the presidential level, but in a lot of local elections, state legislators, that kind of thing. And so our goal is to make sure that doesn't happen again, to make sure people stay engaged, to make sure the party doesn't ignore the grassroots. We saw the party get involved in the Georgia 6th. We've now heard that the party's going to get involved in a race out in Montana. And so our job is, we see our job as to push the national party and also to push progressive candidates to the forefront so that they're getting the attention that they deserve and need around the country.
Are you still seeing people fight over the Hillary-Bernie thing? Because I'm kind of tired of that by now.
Yeah, I mean, off and online, I see those fights. To me, it's annoying because we need to be sticking together. And in reality, in terms of policy, there were not huge differences between Hillary and Bernie. And where we are now is we've got to win races in 2018 and we've got to win the White House in 2020. And we can't do that if we're still fighting about Bernie and Hillary. That race is over. Hillary's doing her thing. Bernie's helping build the party some, and we've got to move on.
Because at the end of this, I see this as an outside division meant to break up the taking over of and the pushing in the right direction of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, people from the Trump side, from the Tea Party side, want to fan that division and make people, Donald Trump even talked about it during the campaign about trying to convince Bernie people to vote for him. And so this definitely helps Donald Trump. My message is, no matter who you voted for in the primary, if you're a progressive, you need to be working together to build a progressive movement and move the Democratic Party to a more progressive party. And I think Tom Perez, and I know he wasn't everyone's favorite candidate, but working with Keith Ellison, I think that can happen. And we've got to move on and build strong candidates.
Yeah, and that starts really at the grassroots level, which is why I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. Because look, everything is local, and everything starts, right in your backyard. You want to change the world, change your part of it. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Andy. He is the communications director for the Resistance Party. ResistanceParty.org is the website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Andy Spear's name, take you right there. But here again, you come back to this idea of taking over the Democratic Party and pushing them in the direction of, maybe the New Deal of where Democrats used to be. Because there was a moment, I think, where, the Democrats have kind of gone off the path.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you want to pinpoint, and maybe this is why people sometimes get mad, it goes back to the Democratic Leadership Council and Bill Clinton.
Yep.
In 1992. So, even Jimmy Carter was kind of a classic New Deal kind of Democrat, and he had some other issues in terms of management. But not by 92, we had moved. So by 2016, people didn't trust the Democratic Party to be the party of the working people. And so, that definitely has to come back. You're seeing candidates, just like we saw in Kansas and in Georgia. I think Ossoff has a great shot of winning on June 20th, by the way, in Georgia 6th. Taking out progressive views, standing up for union rights and working people. And that has to be the message, because working people don't have a party now. There's, President Trump is selling out coal miners and factory workers, the people he promised to help. And the Democrats have to step in and fill that where they have historically been.
Right. The reason I ask that is because I think at some point, Andy, we have to come to the realization that Bill Clinton was not great for the party, that the DLC and the neoliberal trade agenda and all of that, being Republican light, was not a good thing for the Democratic Party. Admit that and then move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I live in the southern state. I live in Tennessee, and that's kind of been the message for a while was, we should be conservative and be Republican light. And you know what? There are 76 Republicans in the House and 26 in the Tennessee Senate. So they have supermajorities in both bodies. We have a Republican governor. Being Republican light didn't work. Given the choice between a Republican and a fake Republican, they choose the real thing every time. And there's a constituency for Democrats in our state and around the country.
You hit a line there that, again, I go back to Harry S. Truman. Said the exact same thing. You give the voters a choice between a Democrat and a Democrat who acts like a Republican and a Republican. They're going to choose the Republican every time.
Yeah, and I mean, the evidence bears in Kentucky that's what happened. Their legislature in the House went Republican for the first time in Kentucky history this past election cycle, because Democrats were trying to, be conservative to, appeal to some of the Trump voters, and it didn't work. They lost. They lost the Kentucky House, and so we've got to stand up and be Democrats. Stand up for a minimum wage. Stand up for Medicare for all, access to education, against vouchers, and for supporting our public schools. And these are things that people all across parties support. And the Democrats need to be there, because the Republicans sure aren't.
Yeah, and they need to be coming out with legislation and pushing, even though they know they're not going to get it through. It should be out there to have the conversation. So let me ask you this, because, I get a lot of people bashing working class Trump voters. They're stupid, they're uneducated, all of those things. Is there a way to reach out to them and say, look, kind of get where you got Trump's a great con man, promised the world and all this, not coming through, especially for those coal miners in Appalachia. Is there a way to reach out to them, or are you even trying?
No, I think there absolutely is a way. And, just to give you a little bit, my family's from eastern Kentucky, and now I live in Tennessee, but coal mining background and then factory workers. And to be honest, you saw a coal mining industry that was devastated and a factory working industry that was devastated. And so you have people, like my uncle who's out of work now. I understand that he feels desperate and wanted somebody to give him some hope. And so I think the message is, look, Donald Trump sold you a bill of goods, and here's the path to get you back on track. And Democrats have to be the people who stand up for guys like my uncle and coal miners. Hillary Clinton tried, but wasn't successful in making the argument well. But the argument she was trying to make, when she talked about putting coal miners out of work, was no matter who's president, there aren't going to be coal jobs.
Right.
We've got to move on to clean energy and other things, and there are lots of jobs out there. She did not articulate that well, but Democrats need to start articulating, look, we're here for you, and giving you access to unions, raising minimum wage, providing access to health care. Those are things that working class voters and voters across the spectrum, but working class voters especially, are missing out on, and they need access to.
Absolutely. And look, I know people are claim we pine for the days of the steel mill jobs and the manufacturing jobs and all those things that come back. What people really are pining for are those middle class wages, those health care benefits, those retirement security benefits that unions brought in those industries. That's what people want. I think the jobs are immaterial, but it's that stability, it's that standard of living. So last question I've got for you, Andy.
Yeah.
How do people get involved? What's the ask? For people who may not know the Resistance or the Resistance Party, what do you want for them?
Well, I mean, what we want is pretty simple. You can follow us on Twitter at Resistance Party. What we do every week is we send out a Monday message that gives you 5 things you can do that week to help resist. And so, initially those have been about calling your members of Congress, and that's really important. As we move closer to 2018, we're going to be talking about candidates running across the country that are progressive, that you can get behind the support. And no matter where you live, you can support John Ossoff at Georgia with money, with phone calls, spend a week in June and come and campaign for him. But that's what we want. So, go to our website, theresistanceparty.org, sign up and get the emails, and we will give you some pretty concrete things you can do. If you have 5 minutes, you can do one. If you have 2 hours, and you can pick and choose where to plug in. But the absolute goal is to stay involved.
That's it. Andy, I appreciate you taking time for us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
Look forward to talking to you again real soon. Thanks so much.
All right. Sounds good.
Andy Spears, Resistance Party, resistanceparty.org. We'll get links at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We're in a fight to bring the middle class back, and we ain't even planning on losing in this mighty war. The working class is under attack. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on. To the death, fight on. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour News Update by Mark Boulanger. Under pressure by labor unions, NGOs, athletes' organizations, and other civil society groups, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, has agreed to incorporate respect for international human rights in the contract signed by host cities of the Olympic Games. The requirement will come into force for the 2024 Olympics to be hosted by either Paris or Los Angeles. I talked to Brendan Schwab about the new IOC rule concerning human rights. Mr. Schwab is the head of Uni World Athletes. Uni is the global union for skills and services such as banking and retail trade. It represents some 20 million workers in 900 unions around the world. I asked Mr. Schwab why it was felt necessary to force the IOC to put respect for human rights in the contract signed by the Olympic host cities.
Well, unfortunately, in recent times, there's been a series of major human rights concerns associated with hosting the Olympic Games. In Rio, there were concerns over the compulsory acquisition of property without due process and compensation. And if we go back a few more further years, say to Sochi, where there were problems with unpaid workers involved in the construction of the Olympic facilities, and even back to Beijing, where there was a crackdown on freedom of speech.
What will be the effect of this contractual stipulation that Olympic host cities respect international human rights?
With the host city contract now being amended to incorporate an express reference to international human rights standards, including the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, then we can expect that all host city governments and also host city actors such as the local organising committee will set in place the necessary capacity so that they can protect, respect and fulfil the fundamental human rights of everyone involved in the Olympic Games during the life cycle. And that life cycle begins with the awarding of the event and, of course, ends with the post-event legacy.
Mental health issues such as debilitating stress are a major cause of absenteeism and other problems in the workplace, according to the UK's Trades Union Congress. That's why the TUC has implemented a program to help workers and employers tackle the problem. The program includes workplace health representatives who help workers find care. At a recent conference on mental health issues, TUC Northern Regional Secretary Beth Farhat described the TUC program, which is helping both workers and employers build healthier, safer workplaces.
Ultimately, we spend the majority of our lives in work, so it's really important that workplaces create an environment that is healthy, that is safe, that has good terms and conditions, and that allows people to fulfill their potential. And what this program does is encourages employers to listen to their employees' needs in relation to health and well-being, and it also encourages those employers to pull together programs that respond to the needs of the workforce. Biggest issue that comes out always is mental health and stress. So what we do as part of the program is deliver representatives who support people who are perhaps suffering from anxiety or stress in the workplace. It's a massive issue. In fact, mental health and stress and anxiety is the biggest cause of absenteeism across the UK and costs the economy billions of pounds at the moment. By training mental health first aiders and health advocates, we're creating a support environment in the workplace where they can advise, refer, but work with employers and occupational health to raise awareness around mental health and wellbeing issues. Big stigma around it in some workplaces and in some communities, but this programme is helping tackle those stigmas and addressing those stigmas in workplaces.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Radio Labor's newscasts are available on its website, iTunes, mobile phones, union websites, and community radio stations. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
You can't stop us now.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Since the prehistoric ages and the days of ancient Greece, right down to the Middle Ages, planet Earth kept going through changes, and then the Renaissance came. The times continue to change. Nothing stayed the same, but there were always renegades, like Chief Sitting Bull, Tom Paine, Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. They were renegades of their time.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check the website, thericksmithshow.com. Angie tweeted to me, I read that union membership once at 30% of total U.S. employees, now under 10. Was this true? And sadly, in the private sector, you're talking under 7%. Last I saw it was like 6.7% in the private sector. Because look, employers with the ossification of labor law and just years of right-wing anti-worker attacks going back to Taft-Hartley, Landrum Griffith, you can just move through the years and all of the restraints on a worker's right to organize. Understand, the Wagner Act gave workers the absolute right to collective bargaining, the ability for workers in the workplace to say, I want to have a representative. I want to join and form a collective entity to negotiate for better wages, hours, conditions. The employer class not happy about that because when the law went into place in 1935, people like my grandfather went and fought for better wages, better hours, better conditions. I remember him telling me his first job was shoveling coal off the back of a coal truck, making 17 cents an hour, working in the wintertime sometimes 20 hours a day. No overtime, none of that stuff, for 17 cents an hour. You think about what Roosevelt did, passing the National Labor Relations Act, giving people the ability to join and form unions, passing the Fair Labor Standards Act, which made overtime protections part of the law. So those 20-hour days, still legal, but you'd have to pay overtime after 40 hours. So he works two 20-hour days. Everything after that would be taxed, would be paid at time and a half. It was a way to get employers to say, maybe we shouldn't be working people to death. And unions came in and brought us and fought for and died for the 8-hour day. I remember, and this is just, I'm not quite 50 yet. I remember the 8-hour day being sacrosanct. I remember when I started working, you got overtime after 8 hours. It wasn't after 40, it was after 8 hours. Almost every job I had was you got paid overtime after 8 hours, because that's how strong the unions still had been in the late 80s. Now understand, at one point, yes, Angie, they were above 30%. It was 35% in the early to mid 60s, because density. You had unions for almost everything. Almost every industry had unions in it. Secretarial pools, carpenters, and you name it, truck drivers, down the line. Everybody had the ability to organize, because every job, and this is what I say, we've got to get back to this. Every job, it doesn't matter what you do, every job should have a contract. Every job. CEOs have contracts, don't they? And they've got contracts for when they get fired, they get golden parachutes, don't they? Absolutely. No CEO works without a contract. But they expect working people to say, well, sorry, no, that's okay, we don't need that. Now understand, you throw the public sector in with the private sector, it's somewhere below 12%, which is why you have the right wing attacking the public sector. Because in the public sector, union density is about 36%. What I would argue is the natural, if you allowed everybody the free will to be able to join, that's about what it would be. And what would happen if we had 36% union density in this country? Where would wages, hours, conditions be? Would we have living wages for workers? You bet you're behind we would. Would we have national health care? I'll bet you we would. Would we have a pension system that would take care of people in their old age? Absolutely. I look at my grandparents' generation. My grandparents, the greatest generation for a reason, because they fought for this stuff. And it's been all of these baby boomers who have said, we know better, the new way, the DLC, and which is why I've never been a Bill Clinton fan, and why I had some problems with Hillary. And yes, I know somebody's going to say, oh, you're bashing Hillary. No, I'm not bashing her. She is what she was. But we got to admit what Bill Clinton did to this country. And I could care less about the blue dress, not even on the radar. When you look at NAFTA, you look at the crime bill, you look at the welfare reform, you look at the telecom bill, you look at Graham Leach Bliley, you go down the list of all of the horrible business. Here you go, take it. All of the neoliberal policies that I've been screaming about for a generation now. He brought us. He did. And you can take this back to Nixon. At the end of the day, the Democratic Party had better find its roots, and its roots are in Roosevelt, giving workers the ability to join unions, forming, and to strike, protecting workers on the job. You go back and you look at that New Deal legislation, it was about helping working class people. It was about helping the poor. It was about, because look, Roosevelt understood the wealthy are going to be fine. They're going to be absolutely fine. And one of the things that one of my lawyer friends likes to remind me is that the original National Labor Relations Act has not one single syllable that gives a right to the employers. Everything in the original National Labor Relations Act, everything in that original Wagner Act was geared towards giving workers rights, because they understood the employer class, the wealth class, has all the rights because they've got all the money. They've got all the power. They have the ability to dictate hours, condition, wages, you name it. They are the king of that castle. And once you step across that threshold, you are their servant, which is why here in Pennsylvania, it still says in the workers' comp law that it's not an employer-employee relationship. It is a master-servant relationship. And we had better, as working people, better get that through our heads that that's the fight right there. If you can't control your economic destiny, if you can't take a day off to participate in a protest or take time off to get involved in something, you've got nothing. If you can't fight for better education for your kids, what do you have? Well, we're going to go back to where the right wants us. The desperation era of the 80s and 90s, and not the 1980s and 90s. Back where kids are in the mines, back where there's no education. You just go to work and life is short and brutal. Is that the future we want? I don't think so, which is why I think you're seeing this resistance. I think you're seeing this rising up, and it's a good thing. But there you go, Angie. There's my thoughts. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, talk media news. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Don't believe that God wants me to give my money to someone like you. But I do believe in what a crazy man can do.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2010. That was the day the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, killing 11 workers and injuring 17 more. The rig experienced an initial blowout, releasing an uncontrollable flow of oil and gas from the well. Hydrocarbons then ignited, causing the explosion and fire. It caused a massive offshore oil spill of over 4 billion barrels and is considered the largest environmental disaster in U.S. history. British Petroleum was the main operator responsible for the well's design. The drilling contractor, Transocean, owned and operated the rig. A handful of smaller companies were also involved. While company and governmental officials initially argued the explosion was unforeseeable and then subsequently blamed each other, there were warning signs in the months leading up to the deadly explosion. Multiple equipment failures, design deficiencies, poor preventative maintenance, bad engineering decisions, and a chase for profits that emphasized low worker injuries at the expense of process safety all combined to create the disaster. As well, regulations and standards enforcement were weak in an almost totally deregulated industry. One phrase used by investigators to characterize the explosion was the normalization of deviance. From workers to managers to executives, none saw the explosion coming. There were dozens of contributing factors, as the Chemical Safety Board investigation noted. They listed 57 key technical, human, and regulatory factors in their 2016 final report. However, engineers had raised concerns about the potential failure of key equipment. Workers were sensitive to the fact that they could be fired for raising safety concerns that delayed drilling. BP was ultimately found responsible and racked up over $70 billion in fines, cleanup, and settlement costs. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for the email, Randall. He says, like I always say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And look, I've been saying that for years. The reality is, if you don't have a voice on the job, if you don't have a voice, you are going to be the one that is, beaten up, robbed, and left on the side of the road. Thanks so much, Randall. Good news coming out of the White House. Evidently, that we're going to be closing down the sidewalk. I'm going to close the sidewalk down. I guess it's the south side of the White House, the south fence there. No longer can you walk on there, so going to be closed indefinitely. They usually just close it at night from like 11 to 6. They've been doing that since 2015, now completely shut off. And it's coming. No more pictures either. You're going to have to buy those from the gift shop in Alexandria. No more going near the White House. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Victoria Jones, Talk Media News. Victoria, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you very much.
So what are you going to do now that the sidewalk's going to be closed? No more walking around the White House, Victoria.
I go in the north entrance.
Oh, snobby, are you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, has anybody hopped that fence recently?
Yes, they've been hopping, and there was this one woman, she got stuck on the fence, and which I thought was precious, and so she got caught. Not content with that, she had another go.
Yeah. You got to give her credit for persistence.
I give her a lot of credit for persistence and stupidity.
Yeah, well, usually those go together sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes they do, especially when you're in the sort of jumping over the fence mode. Yeah.
Fun stuff. So, what's going on in the world?
Well, one thing that's going on in the world, as you know, Congress is out.
Fortunately.
And so that makes our commute great. It makes my commute great because I'm on the red line, which is the line that not only heads to the White House, it heads to Capitol Hill. It also heads to K Street.
Right.
So, I mean, basically it heads to all the evil places. But it means that it's amazing. It really is amazing. In the parking lot that I use, there are 50% more spaces when Congress is out. And so it's been great the last couple of weeks, but it's going to be terrible back on Monday because they're back.
Oh.
And I know. And they've got 1 week to stop the government from shutting down at midnight on next Friday night, the 28th. Not content with that, House Republicans have set themselves another task, which is to pass an Obamacare repeal and replacement as well. Why? Well, because they want to, and also because President Trump's 100th day is the 29th, which actually is two things. It is the day which would be the first day of the government shutdown if they haven't solved it. It's also the day of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which he's not coming to.
And I'm sure the correspondents are thrilled at that.
Well, we're getting on with it, and we're going to celebrate the First Amendment. We've got Woodward and Bernstein coming.
Nice. That should be entertaining. Are they going to song and dance troupe? Is that what we're seeing?
No. We've also got a correspondent from the Daily Show coming. It is. Hang on. Let's keep talking, and it'll come to me in a minute.
I know Samantha Bee was doing her own thing.
She's doing her own thing, and that's like a separate deal. But no, we have Hassan Minhaj.
All right. Well, that was anticlimactic.
No, but he's funny, and he's also, he's got a lot of family who are immigrants, and he's Muslim, and he was at the congressional dinner last year, which is the correspondents from Capitol Hill, and I was at that. He was bloody funny.
Okay, so instead of a correspondence dinner, this is just like going to be a Donald Trump roast then, right?
Well, now, it's interesting because when the Correspondents Association announced him, he said, that he would, that he would not be sort of roasting Donald Trump because he was in absentia, that it wouldn't be a big roast and blah, blah. That's not what Hassan Minhaj said. Hassan Minhaj didn't say, no, I won't roast Trump. He didn't say that, so I think it probably will be a roast.
As it should be. As it should be. Look, when was the last president who didn't show up to this? I'm not in favor of these things anyway, but who was the last one who didn't show up?
It was Ronald Reagan, and but he had actually just been shot.
Yeah, so you could kind of forgive that.
He called in.
All right, well, look at that. The wonders of technology. Anyway, What else is going on? Correspondents' dinner, shutdown of the government, kill a whole bunch of people by repealing Obamacare. What other pain and misery can you bring us?
Well, the Obamacare thing is kind of interesting because we should mention that just very briefly because it's a new deal not the new deal. The new deal that's just happened being brokered. It hasn't happened yet, and it may all fall apart. It's being brokered by the centrist Tuesday Group co-chair and the hard-right Freedom Caucus head, Mark Meadows. So it looks like it could fall apart very easily. And but the things they've got in it are very similar to things that have already been rejected. So, it does look like it could all fall apart. So, but I wanted to mention that you've got the Tuesday Group and the Freedom Caucus talking to each other. So that in itself is kind of interesting.
It's dangerous.
So that's one thing.
But again, one of the things they were going after is the community ratings process. which again is about bringing back rescission, is about bringing back pre-existing conditions, and just basically pricing people out of insurance so that, hey, you have the right to it. I've got the right to go to these fancy 5-star restaurants. Not that I can reach deep enough into my pocket to pay for it, but I got the right to.
Right. I have access to the Trump Hotel in downtown D.C. I don't have $13 to $20 for a cocktail, even assuming that I drank those things.
Yep.
I don't have that, but I have access to it.
Now, I don't know that they would let you in.
They did have this ban on media during the inauguration
All right.
week.
Okay.
I think we're back now. Yeah,
So-
maybe I could wear a disguise.
Maybe you could. There you go. Maybe you could wear one of those red hats and a stupid shirt and fit right in.
I could try.
So what do you think of Ann Coulter not being allowed to speak at Berkeley?
I think she should be allowed to speak at Berkeley.
I agree. Not that I would go, but, I think you should have the right to say whatever you want.
Yeah.
And, as my grandfather always said, you have the right to say whatever you want, and I have the right to punch you in the mouth over it.
Well, I'm not sure that you have to, I don't know about the punching somebody in the mouth over it. I think you have the right to say, I want to punch you in the mouth over it.
There you go. No, but here's the thing, and this is where I think we've gotten to the point to where, here's somebody who just says the most outrageous nonsense she can come up with. And, I still remember, vividly in my mind, her writing that her only regret with Timothy McVeigh was he didn't bomb the New York Times building.
Yeah, she says things just to get a rise out of people.
And here's the thing. I ignore her because of just that. She's just trying so hard to get attention. And you go, when I was a kid, you mocked those people. You ignored them. When did we start, really, putting her on center stage? What should have happened is let her speak and nobody show up.
That's a point.
Yeah, there you go.
That is a valid point. That is a very valid point.
I bumped into her once at one of those talkers conventions.
Oh, you did?
Very cold. In fact, I turned around and I
Yes.
go, did it get cold in here or is it just me?
Oh, you said that?
Yeah, she gave me a really very, she's a big woman. Really she's tall.
She's a tall woman. Yes, she fills a room.
In fact, she dwarfed Sean Hannity, which I just thought was hysterical.
That's very funny.
Yeah, so there you go.
He's not small either. Also, the Georgia 6th district, there's going to be a runoff. This is the John Ossoff run, and there is going to be a runoff, and against Karen Handel, the former Georgia Secretary of State, who's a mainstream Republican. She's not a Trumpian, even though Trump was trumpeting it, and it's going to be very interesting. And I don't know whether Democrats can pull this one off or not. I would say to John Ossoff, stop talking about how much you're supporting your medical student girlfriend by living with her outside the district and move back in.
Yeah, get in the district.
Yeah.
Good bit of advice, and one maybe that he should take.
Marry her, make an honest woman of her, and move her in.
There you go. Maybe that's what you could do like the day before, make a whole stunt out of it.
Ooh.
I mean, in the wedding present that you would give them is your vote. I mean, we sell our vote every day, so too far.
A little too far, but it's not bad.
Yeah, well, sadly, I don't think he's going to win because the district is so far out. He had a great showing, and it really showed. It gave some energy and all of that. And I hope that people will take that energy and continue. But sadly, in looking at the numbers of that district, I don't know. It'll be interesting.
But do you think that this is how it's going to be so frustrating for Democrats, the landscape throughout the country?
Look, I mean, you're looking at a district that was lost by what was it, like 20 points in the last election?
Yeah.
I think I think it's going to be a couple this time, so you can take a moral victory from that. You look at I think it was Kansas was a 30-point victory in the last for Republicans. It was only like 5%. So you're seeing that, I think you could take moral victories from that. We'll see. Interesting stuff. Victoria, appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
Always great talking with Victoria Jones, Talk Media News. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, as we've been pointing out, Deepwater Horizon Day, as well as 420 Day. So happy 420 day to everyone. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham.
America's got to wake up. This economy, if it doesn't create good, sustainable jobs for people, it's going to continue to feed the very division, despair, and disparity that's taking place and driving this country apart.
United Food and Commercial Workers President Mark Perrone. Nearly 90,000 U.S. retail workers lost their jobs since October of 2016. Brick and mortar general merchandise store jobs were hit the hardest as more people order those goods online. Perrone says that what happens to these and other workers on the job-losing side of new technology habits isn't just a tech issue. It's a working-class social justice question that goes to the heart of the kind of society Americans want.
And we have to make a decision. What kind of society do we want? Do we want a society that only a handful can pay their bills, can go to the doctor, can provide education to their children? What are we supposed to say? Let them eat cake?
Perrone says as technology changes, making life more convenient for many, it's important to make sure that workers' needs are met, regardless of the technological advances. Perrone says the UFCW wants workers to get the respect and the rewards we deserve for the very essential contributions we make.
It's not so great that the group that's out there doing the work every single day is considered to be the bottom of the totem pole, and the ownership class that owns the stock should be the ones that ultimately receive all the benefit in society. United Food and Commercial Workers believes that we need to ultimately improve the lives of hardworking men and women in America.
The Fix LA Coalition is calling on city department heads to fulfill Mayor Eric Garcetti's promise to create 5,000 new jobs to restore city services. Budget hearings are underway for Los Angeles. The Fix LA Coalition, which includes labor unions, says the budget cuts that cost jobs mean unreasonable 911 emergency wait times, neglected trash, potholes, and broken sidewalks, among other issues. There are also hundreds of pending city employee retirements in Los Angeles. The Fix LA Coalition says targeted local hire was a key program to the pledge to create 5,000 new jobs. The failure to hire anywhere near 5,000 people calls into question the city's real commitment to the targeted local hire program, which is supposed to hire people living in disadvantaged communities. WIN is brought to you in part by the Amalgamated Transit Union, the largest labor union representing transit and allied workers in the U.S. and Canada. Online at atu.org. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Yeah, this one's for the workers who toil night and day, by hand and by brain, to earn your pay, who for centuries on past for no more than your bread, have bled for your countries and counted your days.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So today, 7 years ago today, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig went boom. 11 workers killed, more injured. And you go back earlier this week on Sunday, 4 years ago Sunday, you saw the explosion at the West Texas fertilizer plant. And as I've said about that, who could have thought it a bad idea to put explosive stuff, combustible stuff in wooden boxes in a wooden shed with no sprinkler system in the Texas heat? Who could have possibly thought anything could have gone wrong? Well, here to talk about these disasters, these catastrophes, and what we've done since, to prevent them, I've asked Peter Dooley to come talk with us. He's a senior organizer with the National Committee on Safety and Health. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thanks, Rick. It's great to be back on the show.
So I look at these anniversaries as not so much as an anniversary, but as a moment to remember these tragedies that have happened and to commit to, figure out how to never allow them to happen again.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they're part of a continuing carnage that happens in workplaces every day. More than 13 American workers get killed on the job every single day of the year. And so this fits into a bigger picture, which next week is the annual Worker Memorial Week, in which throughout the world we memorialize workers who have been killed on the job, give tribute to them and their families and the communities that are losing from these tragedies, and really rededicate ourselves to action to prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening.
Now, let me ask you on the legislative front and on the regulatory front, because look, I don't know that there's anyone who thinks that we should allow employers to create unsafe working conditions and allow these kind of scenarios to fester, at least not sane, rational people anyway. What have we done in the interim to make sure this stuff doesn't happen? Because look, I look at West Texas, and we were there on the ground. It was a massive explosion that basically tore through an entire community, schools, nursing homes, residential areas, and you go, explain to me how this is how we're not regulating this stuff.
Well, certainly, yes, and it brings up a lot of issues that we need to be doing better in terms of land planning, land use planning, in terms of facilities, but also preventing these kinds of very preventable disasters from happening in terms of, like you mentioned, the storage of highly explosive materials right next to high schools, nursing homes, hospitals, and not only in West Texas Fertilizer Company was the one that blew up, but just in Texas, there were about 20 other facilities that had the same issues in terms of highly explosive materials right next to the community. So there's a lot of work to be done. But it's worth mentioning, that even though the numbers of workers killed instantly on the job, like I said, more than 13 a day, that's almost 5,000 a year. And this is just American workplaces. But then from exposure to other chemicals, causing long-term damage, the estimates range from 10 to 20 that number. So from 50,000 a year to 100,000.
Right.
And so which is just and those numbers are going up, by the way. Unfortunately, the last 2 years that we have the numbers, the number of fatalities increased several hundred. In a time when we know we have more technology to prevent these from happening, we're using it less, and more workers are getting hurt and killed. But it's worth remembering, given the attacks that are on the regulatory process in general these days, including Department of Labor and OSHA, that before, when OSHA was created, the year that it was created, there were almost 3 times the number of fatalities that were happening each year in American workplaces. So OSHA, has done, and just in financial savings, the estimates are like $200 billion.
Right.
And as better as we got to be, and we have to have better standards and better worker rights, because really this all, it's not that. I mean, OSHA just provides a framework for workers to be having some leverage to be making improvements in their own workplace. But without that sort of enforcement mechanism behind the scenes, and then that really erodes the whole process for making workplaces inherently safer.
Right. I saw a statistic. It would take, I think, the current number of OSHA inspectors that we have to inspect every workplace would be something like 115 years or some outrageous number like that.
Actually, nationally, it's 150.
Oh, wow. So it's gone up.
And even less in some of the states that have a little bit more inspectors. But again, it doesn't come near to really doing justice to the issues that need to be happening. But really, it's what we need to be doing is having workers and unions be more empowered and deputized is what we've said for years. To be really negotiating health and safety programs, and really to be making their workplaces safer for everybody, for themselves as well as the community, as well as often in healthcare. It's about patients. It's really about, this is a community kind of issue.
Yeah, I agree. But here's the thing: what I'm getting from what you're saying, if I'm getting this right, you're talking about more job-killing regulations, then, right?
Well, that's and the anti-regulatory environment is a disaster. It's a disaster for workers. It's a disaster for the community. It's a disaster for families. One of the most, one of the bright spots in this whole issue is the increased activism that has been happening over the years, where even the events next week around Worker Memorial Week have tremendously expanded to involve more community members, worker centers around the country, which, by the way, these numbers, Latino worker fatalities have been dramatically increasing in the last 8 years. Every single year, more than at any other sector of the population. And it's not surprising. I mean, Latino workers are in some of the most dangerous jobs. They are given the least amount of education and training, about protecting themselves and their rights. And obviously, there's a lot of issues around being able to exercise their rights.
And it's about a lot of it. They're in the underground economy, so they can't speak up when something is horribly wrong, and so they're constantly in harm's way.
Exactly. And this issue of speaking up is the core of every single workplace health and safety program. So many programs do things to discourage workers from speaking up and reporting things. That's a self-defeating mechanism which allows companies to say, "Oh, we got a great health and safety record. We don't need government to be, sort of being a watchdog." That's all a bunch of crap. It just drives these programs underground. One of the best examples is one that you mentioned, Deepwater Horizon. And if folks have not seen the movie, I really encourage people to see the movie that's available on Netflix. It's really very true to the facts of the case. Deepwater Horizon, otherwise known by BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. That oil rig was being given an award that morning of the explosion for low injury rates. And again, it's this whole thing of driving health and safety complaints underground, and having these records that don't really reflect the reality of the health and safety issues that are there. Deepwater Horizon, 11 workers killed, many others injured, 17 seriously injured, and of course the worst environmental catastrophe certainly in the last couple of decades. So again, it brings worker health and safety is really about the environment, it's about the community, and we need to be doing so much more.
I'm absolutely with you. But what we get out of our current political system now, and I use West Texas as the example. And I guess a softball question here for you: do you buy the ATF's assessment that was a criminal act that caused the explosion?
No, we really focused on the system problems that are inherent in these in a lot of the health and safety issues the catastrophes that happen. It's always, and I've investigated a lot of workplace fatalities myself. It's always a multiple problem factors that all come together, to create these catastrophes.
Right. I would argue the crime was that you stored this stuff more than you should have had in wooden boxes in a wooden shed with no sprinkler system or way to stop a fire in the Texas heat. That's the crime, especially when you're no more than 100 yards from a school and a nursing home.
Yeah.
And also the crime to me, Peter, is that you had the Attorney General at the time telling people who live near these facilities, as you pointed out, there are 20 across the state, to just go knock on their door and ask them because we don't need any oversight. That to me is the crime.
Yeah, and the lack of the lack of criminal prosecution is really throughout the system around worker health and safety. There's very, very little. There's little of it actually done. There's some examples where, for example, there's been several in New York City recently related to construction deaths. But that's really the minority. Workplace health and safety is not really seen as a big enough priority.
Yep. Well, I've always said, really, Peter, that if I wanted to kill you, I mean, honestly, if I ever wanted to kill you or somebody, I'd just hire you.
Yeah. Well, and again, Deepwater Horizon is a good example where horrible, decisions being made. And again, it's one of the better popular movies that really kind of bring this across about the corporate greed and decision making that leads to these kinds of problems happening. And it's often easy to blame workers for a particular, issue that happens. But if you really look at the bigger picture, it's decisions being made in the boardrooms and such that often are creating the environment where these tragedies can happen.
Yep. I always go back to Don Blankenship's memo.
Yeah,
we don't get paid to do safety stuff. We get paid to run coal. That's it. You don't need to. That's the CEO mentality, Peter.
And that is such the perfect example, because it was the smoking gun was there, which is rare. For one thing, most of these workplace fatalities are not really investigated in the way that they need to be.
Yep.
And by the way, one of the agencies that do really investigate especially the bigger traumatic, such as Deepwater Horizon or West Texas, is the Chemical Safety Board, which is an independent agency, federal agency created 25 years ago, which is currently under attack. And really is basically looking to not have a budget starting in October.
Yep, no, that was part of Trump's skinny budget to eliminate the funding for the Chemical Safety Board. Because look, we don't want to protect those people. We don't want workers to be safe.
And this is an organization that does really, look at really what happened. Does a thorough investigation. Creates reports as well as videos, about how to prevent this in the future. And that's why it was created. So it's really, it does a tremendous service for the public. And again, it's under, it's under attack.
Well, all worker protections are under attack in this country.
Well,
Peter,
yes.
Because we've got this mind that the benevolent wealth class, the employer class and their benevolence, they'll take care of us. So let me ask you a last question then. What do we do? I mean, you see this, as you pointed out, 13 people go to work. 13 people are going to go to work today. They're not going to go home. We know that between 50 and 75,000 people die of occupational illnesses that we never hear about. What are we supposed to do? What do working people do?
Well, so get involved, get active. Get involved in your workplace, in your union. So our organization, National COSH, our website is COSHnetwork.org. Our tweet is at National Kosh. We have a lot of resources available. I think people have to, and people have to learn what their rights are in this issue. They also, this is a generational issue. A lot of people that I talk to about this, they come up to me and say, my dad, sort of got hurt doing this kind of work, and grandparents. But on the other end, it's about our kids and grandparents, because young workers are at the highest risk in a lot of these situations. So it's something that we can be bringing to our family. And the more that we're active in this issue, the more we're going to be prepared to prevent the next tragedy, or to be responding to one that happens, and trying to really make sense out of it by using it as a lesson learned, and making things better for everyone, our family as well as our coworkers and our community. It's really about that.
Good stuff. Peter, I appreciate you taking some time.
And next week, keep in mind, everyone, next week is the highlight of the season for health and workplace health and safety.
Yep.
So if there's over 100 events that we list on our website, thekoshnetwork.org. And if there's not a Kosh group in your area, get involved in one, get one started. Take a look at our website. My email is peter@nationalkosh.org. People can contact me. So really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show, Rick.
Good stuff, Peter. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Again, if you want to check out Peter's information, we'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can check out their website, their Twitter account, and all of that. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show for working people from the top.
First ones to die, the first ones in line for that pie in the sky, and we're always the last when the cream is shed out. For the worker is working when the fat counts above. We're the first ones to stop, we're the first ones to die.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1853. That was the day that Harriet Tubman led her first trip on the Underground Railroad, the clandestine network that helped enslaved people escape slavery and move north to freedom. One of the most remembered conductors on the railroad, Tubman herself escaped slavery in eastern Maryland. Tubman had been forced to work in the fields, performing back-breaking labor under a brutal overseer. As a girl, Tubman was injured when she was hit in the head by a weight thrown by an overseer. The injury plagued her with headaches and visions that Tubman attributed as signs from God. To escape these harsh conditions, Tubman had to leave her family behind. But she did not forget them. On her first trip to free those enslaved, the group included her sister and 2 children. On subsequent trips, she helped lead her brother and aged parents to freedom. In all, Tubman made 19 trips back to the South. She became known as Moses, leading her people out of bondage. These journeys came at a personal risk for Tubman. Enraged Southerners placed a $40,000 bounty on her head. But Tubman was known to say that she never lost a single passenger. The Civil War did not stop Tubman's bravery. She worked as a cook, a nurse, and even a spy for the Union Army. The renowned abolitionist Frederick Douglass wrote a letter for Tubman where he wrote, quote, "The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witnesses of your devotion to freedom and of your heroism." The horrors of the slave labor system ended in the United States because of the courage of those like Harriet Tubman who risked their lives to stand up against injustice. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Your proud defender of the working class majority, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Website, ricksmithshow.com. Jay Walker says, look up the Texas City explosion. We already had the rules in place to stop it. I haven't looked at the Texas City explosion. I'm looking at West Texas. That's the explosion that, the anniversary was on Sunday. In fact, we stood on the ground just a couple of months after the explosion. And, I still remember the whole back half of the school just blown, all the windows blown out, the basketball hoops. If you've been on like a high school basketball, outside the gym, has the big steel poles, the big 6-inch round steel poles holding the baskets up. There were 6 of them. There were 6 of these baskets, 3 courts. And the explosion, the force of this explosion blew those basketball hoops with the poles at a 90-degree. They were parallel to the ground. Just blew them all over like they were nothing. Bent those steel poles. Just the percussion from the blast, just flat down. And, you look at the nursing home across the street, basically the roof was blown off, all the windows blown out. There were like 150 houses that were just demolished. And you go, what kind of a genius thought we could put a fertilizer plant right within a golf ball shot of a school? Literally, I mean, you look at you can look it up online. It's literally like a 9-iron shot from the fertilizer plant. And you say, well, we've got the rules in place. Well, what good is having a rule in place if no one is enforcing them? And I go back to the Attorney General of Texas who said, look, we don't need any regulations. If you want to know what the West Texas fertilizer plant had, you should have gone and knocked on the door. Just go and ask them. They'll tell you. No, they won't. Because they were breaking the law by having that much ammonium nitrate in wooden boxes to begin with, let alone in the wooden shed without a sprinkler system. I mean, you want to talk about criminal. And I'm sorry, I don't buy that it was a criminal act that started the fire. Not buying it. Because we haven't found anybody, but you can just throw it out there. Well, it was a criminal act. Okay, they're still looking for the guy. Maybe they're with OJ on the golf courses looking for the killers. Oh, wait a minute. OJ's still in jail. Maybe that's where we should put the owners. Just a thought. But here's the thing. When you talk about health and safety, when you talk about safety on the job, I go back to, my working life. I worked as a truck driver for years. And if I went out to that truck and there was something wrong, if the brakes were out of adjustment, if there was a marker light out, it didn't matter. If there was something wrong, it didn't get on the road. Not only did it protect me, it protected the public. And why could I do this? Because I had a union. And the union would stand behind us. I now work for a company that no union. And I hear people saying that, well, I was told I had to do this, and you hear these horror stories, especially in the trucking industry, which is now the Wild West of deregulation. To where, you're told, we don't care if you need to break the hours laws. We don't care if you don't have any breaks. You just get where you're supposed to go. And if you speak up, if you say anything, you're going to be fired because you don't have that protection. I mean, that's the thing that, again, why I'm such a strong proponent of labor unions. The ability to say no. The ability to stand up and say, this is wrong, fix it. The ability to say, I'm not going to put myself in harm's way. I'm not going to put others in dangerous situations. And you go, well, only 13 people a day are dying. That's not bad. Because if you look to our past where, there were years where 100,000 people died a year on the job. And to be honest, you're right. We've done better. I would argue that, deindustrialization had a lot to do with it, but also OSHA had a lot to do with it. Unions had an awful lot to do with it. But even one unnecessary death is too many. And at the end of the day, until we, you, me, all of us stand up and say no, they're going to continue to do it. And we hear the frame all the time, don't we? The job-killing regulations. And as I always follow it up with, what about the people killing lack of regulations? What about the lack of enforcement? And yeah, maybe you had something in place that could have stopped it, but nobody enforced it. And this is the other part of the Republican agenda. You starve the beast. We're going to make government so small we can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub. So you could have the greatest laws in the world. If they don't have funding, like Trump wants to do away with the Chemical Safety Board, if you don't have regulators like at the EPA, if you don't have inspectors like at OSHA, what good is it? Okay, fine. After the fact, after you've got a dead worker, after you've got 11 or 13 or 20 or whatever, then you go back and you a little fine, slap on the wrist. Don't do it again. We promise. What's it take? That's the question. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What's it like at your workplace? Is it possible someone where you work could end up dead? Sure hope not. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Of all the people suffering economic pain today, who should get priority attention from the new president and Congress? Regular folks in our country say that those on the lower rungs of the economic ladder, the poor and downtrodden working class, ought to be the priority. But then, regular folks don't run Congress or Trump's White House. The Donald's working-class voters must be stunned to see that his top economic priority is not them, but a tiny group dwelling in luxury at the very tippy top of the ladder, Wall Street bankers. Rather than pushing an urgently needed FDR-style jobs program, Trump and company are rushing to aid the richest Americans at the expense of the working class, actually proposing to unleash the banksters to defraud and gouge workaday people. For example, they want to save the poor financial giants from a consumer protection called the fiduciary rule. If you've got a 401k retirement plan, chances are it's managed by a firm of financial advisors. So this rule simply requires them to act in your best interest rather than shifting your money into risky investments that pay them bigger commissions. Prior to the enactment of this ethics provision in 2015, many advisors were serving themselves, gleefully ripping off their customers, mostly ordinary working families, to the tune of $17 billion a year. This is Jim Hightower saying, that's immoral, but it's real money, so the industry has been lobbying hard, but unsuccessfully, to kill the legal requirement that money advisors deal honestly with clients. Now, however, they've got a president who appreciates dishonest business dealings and is going all out to liberate them from the shackles of ethics. Hallelujah, shout Wall Street's bankers. Free at last, free at last. Thank Donald Almighty, we are free at last to gouge consumers.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Just when you thought it was safe, those crazy Republicans are at it again. It's time for the Rick Smith Show's Conservative Alert.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So Reuters reported this morning that Texas Representative Jeb Hensarling, head of the House Banking Committee, has unfurled the GOP latest attempt to gut or, well, repeal and replace Dodd-Frank, the 600-page Financial Choice Act, or FCA. What happened to the Herman Cain 2 or 3 pages stuff? Because, hey, how complicated could this be? You could easily read it over dinner. Anyway, the FCA, the Free Choice Act, and I got to be honest, anytime I hear a Republican talk about choice, I grab my wallet because I know it has nothing to do with my choice and everything to do with fleecing me and our wages, retirement, or the safety net. And what we've got simultaneously, we've got a president standing at the ready with the executive order pen for when this repeal and replace plan goes, the way of the horrible Health Care Act south. But here to tell us just how bad this 600-page nightmare could and will be, I've asked Joe Valenti to come talk with us. Joe is the Director of Consumer Finance at the Center for American Progress. Joe, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely.
So here it is, choice, Joe. We're going to have choice in the financial markets, finally.
And I think you said it perfectly, that it's about giving companies more choices to rip off consumers, rip off taxpayers, and just lead us down a pathway to more bailouts and more problems down the line.
But we're going to deregulate, Joe, and deregulation is always good. That's what I've been told. Deregulation is going to bring us a utopian society of freedom and liberty.
It's so easy to rail against regulations, but you know who pays when those regulations are rolled back? It's you and me. If you look just at credit cards, which is something that was taken care of right before Dodd-Frank and the CFPB has worked on, the credit card rules that are in place now have knocked about 2 points off the cost that everybody pays on their credit cards. If you carry a balance on your credit card, you probably saved about $300 last year because of these federal rules about how credit card companies can't fleece you.
But here's the thing. I mean, you've got all these rules in place, and I just saw a story about Wells Fargo where, had all of these different regulatory bodies, had they done their jobs, maybe the Wells Fargo stuff wouldn't have happened. So this is another example of why, Joe, we don't need regulations, because they're not doing them anyway.
All right, well, that's the thing. It's that you've got these special interests who are paying. Last Congress, it was $2.7 million a day in lobbying and campaign contributions, trying to gut the rules that we have. And then we've got members of Congress who will, if the regulators do something successful, they say, oh, you weren't supposed to do that. You weren't justified in going after this bank. Or they'll say, oh, well, why did you catch this so late? And, they want to have it both ways and find people asleep at the switch. But then when regulators are going after real wrongdoing, they're like, why did you do that in the first place?
Yeah, I would argue that's more, it's not as much falling asleep at the switch, is it's that swinging door to where you're thinking, hey, I'm a regulator, I might want to get a job in the industry. I'll just look away a little bit. It's not a big deal today.
There is a huge revolving door problem. And it's also, in terms of who's making these decisions. I mean, if you look at who the advisors are in the White House and at Treasury who are studying how to undo these regulations, it's a bunch of Wall Street folks. It's exactly the people who got us into the foreclosure crisis and derailed our economy who are now coming up with the plans to supposedly save us.
No, geez, I just sit here and I go, look, we've had this deregulation now for 30 plus years. And I go back to just some basic, and maybe I'm just being simplistic, but we didn't have these kind of massive collapses before the Clinton era and of Glass-Steagall. Why can't we just somehow do that?
I think Glass-Steagall is a great first step, and I'd love to see us move in that direction, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. I think these products that are being sold have gotten so complicated, and the growth of the financial sector has been so big that there's no sort of one thing that can unravel it.
Right.
What I know is the wrong approach is to say that, well, we need to gut everything that we've got and let banks get away with doing just about anything and everything in the name of preserving choices.
So Wild West of banking, not a good thing.
Exactly. I mean, if you go back decades, there was a time, people have said this over and over again, when banking was boring. And you had people who would bank and you had people who would invest, and it was profitable, and markets were satisfied. We had a minimum wage that would be in the order of $11-12 today after adjusting for inflation. The economy was working fine. I think we had this overabundance of greed and a desire to make a quick buck without thinking about the long-term consequences. And that's what happens with all of these predatory products that are out there and companies trying to get a free pass from regulation, is that they're looking at the quick buck and they're not looking at whether their customers will still be around or will still be successful a year or two from now.
Well, they don't care. It's short term, quarterly gains. It's how much can we put in our pocket now? And you said something there a second ago that caught my attention. You said that these things are so complex, and it reminded me of Alan Greenspan when the economy collapsed in 2008 and the derivatives markets and all of that, because he was against regulating them at all because they were so complicated. And, you go, if they're that complicated, Alan, maybe we shouldn't have them. Not every person should have a nuclear bomb because they're kind of complicated. It could cause a problem.
There is something to be said for keeping it simple, particularly when we're talking about consumer products. I mean, if you look at mortgages, we've had the 30-year mortgage now for decades. It's created, one of the highest home ownership rates and has allowed people to buy homes, affordably, relatively sustainably. And it's something that people understand. It's when you got into some of the more exotic products out there that whether it's a mortgage or an insurance product or a loan, and you have no idea how any of this works, and you have to trust the person selling it to you, you're at a huge disadvantage. Yeah. And I think the same happens when you've got these complicated financial instruments that the regulators and even the rating agencies on Wall Street who are supposed to figure out how risky these things are, if they can't figure them out, then it's really hard for them to accurately describe what these risks are.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way you use the exotic, financial products. I love that. Basically, they're ripoffs is what they are. But I love the language because, just my wife and I went and saw a movie the other day, the Morgan Freeman movie, Going Out in Style, I think it was called. And it's about a guy who, Michael Caine, who basically was going to lose his house because of an exotic financial product. And they were talking about robbing a bank and all of this stuff. And at the end, it was Stephen Mnuchin who had basically bankrolled part of this movie. I just thought it was interesting that all of those frames of a guy losing his house because of one of these products, and bank robbery and theft and all this stuff, and Mnuchin all right there in one little package.
Absolutely, it all gets rolled up and. It's these exotic products that, people don't know or can't possibly figure out what's in the fine print. I mean, I talk a lot about arbitration, which is something that the Choice Act would block the federal government from going after. Arbitration is the couple of lines in the fine print on, the apps on your phone or the financial products that you buy, or even if you buy a Snuggie now, there's an arbitration notice that comes in the box, and it says, you've agreed that you're not going to sue us, that if you have a problem, you'll go to arbitration, which is a judge and jury that we've picked and paid for who will handle your case in private. And that's a way for companies to sweep all kinds of things under the rug, and the courts have upheld it because they've said that, well, you agreed in this contract that you weren't going to take us to court, and you have to keep your word on that. And so we're just going to handle this quietly and in the dark.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think the vast majority of Americans have no idea that what you just said is any of this stuff. And I ran into it once. I went to have a medical procedure done. I was going to get a hip injection, and the first thing they handed me was this massive stack of forms. And I'm one of these people who read everything. And in there was one of these mandatory arbitration agreements. And the doctor was, trying to convince me it's for your own protection. It's for your own good. Good. No, it wouldn't be in there if it was for my good.
Right. And it's also, unfortunately, it's not like at that point you can just back out and say, you know what, I'm going to find another doctor.
I did. I walked out. I said,
really?
I'm not signing it.
Good for you. That's not something that people do every day.
But it's something that I should. And you look at this regulation, you look at all of this stuff. At some point, we, the American people, have to rise up and go, look, these kind of schemes that benefit the wealthy and end up screwing us. So at some point, somebody's got to fight for the little guy. And I know we're talking about the end of Dodd-Frank and this Choice Act, but this is just one more part of a much larger picture.
Absolutely, and it's thinking about our, arbitration as part of the sort of fundamental legal rights that corporations and the wealthy have been able to retain, but somehow take away from us. If you think about, arbitration and going to court, if you think about bankruptcy for homeowners or people who have been struggling with severe student debt, that these are things that they're in the Constitution. They're things that we've taken for granted, and little by little, as we've deregulated the economy and gutted the safety net and come up with all of these exotic financial instruments, some of these legal protections have gone away too.
Now, one of the things you write about in your piece, and I highly suggest people take a look at the piece you guys have put out on this. You talk about, and there's a lot of technical jargon in here like the orderly liquidation authority. I don't even know what that is, but ending it doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
No, orderly liquidation authority was something put in place in Dodd-Frank after the crisis to basically say that if a bank is failing, we've got a process to take care of it before we have to worry about, having bailouts in these last-minute crises that we dealt with in 2008. You take that away, the proposal that Chairman Henserling has is a form of bankruptcy for banks, but we already have something on the books that seems to be working. I don't know why we would need to change it. I don't know why we would need to gut dozens of other regulations on everything from retirement advice to consumer protection to making sure that banks, have enough money in reserves just to change the way that we handle these things.
Yeah, I mean, again, I keep coming back to if there's a banking chairman from Texas, I want nothing that he proposes, because I blame Phil Graham for the collapse of 2008 as much as I blame anyone. So in looking at this, again, another one of those moments where nothing good comes of this. So let me ask you, in 20 years, are we if this passes, we setting ourselves up for another great collapse, or will it be sooner?
It's hard to say exactly when and how it's going to happen. The next crisis is never like the last one that we had. But I think that these are the types of steps that accelerate risk and make it more likely that something dangerous is going to happen. And it all comes down really to how you treat, the everyday borrower or homeowner or whatever. If we had protections in place against some of these exotic mortgages and other products in the 2000s, and were able to stop that when it started,
yep.
We could have avoided a whole run-up to the crisis.
But let me ask you this, Joe, because
we have to remember that connection.
Right, but let me ask you this, because the right's going to throw back at you. Well, those people chose those products, Joe. This is about again, their choice word. They made the choice. They made the decision to do this. It's their fault, not ours.
I'm going to borrow something that I had heard once, I think from Maxine Waters, and it was, and the people in Flint chose to drink the water. Right, that it's not a situation where it's a meaningful choice. It's not like you've, walked into McDonald's and you can get a Big Mac or a chicken sandwich and that was your choice. You're talking about something that is ridiculously complicated and potentially really harmful for you. And a situation where nobody really has your back
right.
In this transaction.
Or the guy on the other side of the table is just trying to get as much for his pocket as he can get out of you. I'm with you, because those interest-only loans. People were telling me we're getting those. I'm going, sounds dumb to me. The balloon ones, all of that stuff just sounded at the time really dumb. But here's the thing: most of us aren't financially savvy. Most of us are listening to the person on the other side of the desk because we kind of view them as the people who know.
Right, and most of the time when you're in these situations, that person is, you wouldn't be buying that if that person didn't have something to sell to you. Right, this is not something, you don't walk into a bank and say, hey, you know what, I want an interest-only mortgage where the payments are only going to go up and I'm going to be on the hook for a massive amount of money in a few years. I don't know anybody who's not, a professional real estate investor who would walk into a bank and ask for that.
Right.
So it's something that has to be sold to you and not something that you would have picked yourself anyway.
Good
and
point.
We see that, across the board.
Anything good in this if it passes? And what are the chances of it passes? And is there anything good in it?
I don't see anything good coming out of this except for the same thing that we've been seeing all year, which is all of a sudden, people are aware of things that are under attack that are actually really important and fundamental to our economic system and to our political system. But, and I don't know that in its current form it's going to get through both houses of Congress, but I think there are pieces of this that the administration may try to do on its own through executive orders. Secretary Mnuchin has until June to put forward a plan for how the federal government is going to respond to President Trump's executive order about changing financial regulation. And I think at least some of these pieces could go forward on their own. I mean, there are bills already out there to kill the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and to exempt institutions from all different kinds of regulation.
So basically, guard your wallet.
Exactly.
Guard your wallet. You know, the fact, I still got it in my mind. You said $2.7 million every day spent by the banking industry on in Congress. And it just reminds me of something my grandfather always said, that if a rich guy's going to spend $1 to tell you don't need something, you better spend $2 to get it, because they understand return on investment.
Yep.
Just is what it is. Joe, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. I look forward to having you back.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on.
Good stuff, Joe Valente. Again, you want to check out their piece, I've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Joe's name, take you right there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
So that's how it is. That's what we got. If the president wants to admit it or not, you can read it in the paper, read it on the wall, hear it on the wind. If you're listening at all, get out of that limo and look us in the eye. Call us on a cell phone, tell us all why. In Dayton, Ohio, or Portland, Maine, or a cotton gin out on the Great High Plains that's done closed down, along with the school and the hospital and the swimming pool. Dust devils dance in the noonday heat. There's rats in the alley and trash in the street. Gang graffiti on a boxcar door. We can't make it here anymore.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2010. That was the day the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, killing 11 workers and injuring 17 more. The rig experienced an initial blowout, releasing an uncontrollable flow of oil and gas from the well. Hydrocarbons then ignited, causing the explosion and fire. It caused a massive offshore oil spill of over 4 billion barrels and is considered the largest environmental disaster in U.S. history. British Petroleum was the main operator responsible for the well's design. The drilling contractor, Transocean, owned and operated the rig. A handful of smaller companies were also involved. While company and governmental officials initially argued the explosion was unforeseeable and then subsequently blamed each other, there were warning signs in the months leading up to the deadly explosion. Multiple equipment failures, design deficiencies, poor preventative maintenance, bad engineering decisions, and a chase for profits that emphasized low worker injuries at the expense of process safety all combined to create the disaster. As well, regulations and standards enforcement were weak in an almost totally deregulated industry. One phrase used by investigators to characterize the explosion was the normalization of deviance. From workers to managers to executives, none saw the explosion coming. There were dozens of contributing factors, as the Chemical Safety Board investigation noted. They listed 57 key technical, human, and regulatory factors in their 2016 final report. However, engineers had raised concerns about the potential failure of key equipment. Workers were sensitive to the fact that they could be fired for raising safety concerns that delayed drilling. BP was ultimately found responsible and racked up over $70 billion in fines, cleanup, and settlement costs. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, you stop and you think about the amount of money that special interests pay to our, just to lobby our elected officials to get what they want. And that's really what this is. It's just about just getting what they want. And it doesn't get any simpler than that. More for them, less for us. And, as I've said, the reality is, honestly, truthfully, the reality is anytime I hear a Republican talk about choice, grab the wallet, man. And grab hard. Because, all of this stuff, and you go back to, all of the deregulation, back to the Carter years, even, as we were, that neoliberal nonsense had begun, even back in the Nixon years, we deregulated the airlines, and boy, that did really well, huh? We deregulated the trucking industry, and oh boy, yeah, That was fantastic. That was just wonderful. Not only did it not lower prices as it was promised, what it did is it destroyed wages and conditions and pensions and everything in the trucking industry. And, there was an article not too long ago, I think it was at Forbes magazine, that pointed out when I started in the trucking industry back in the 80s, in today's dollars, the salary for a truck driver back then was over $100,000. So you could make a solid, a really good middle class living. Honestly, and I did. And look, that's how I got kind of sucked into it, because I was making great money back in the 80s and 90s. In fact, when I started in the late 80s, I was making $15 an hour with health care when I got enough hours, and a pension credit when I got enough hours. Back then, understand, today, that same job doesn't even pay $12 an hour and has zero health care, zero benefits. Think about that. I mean, you're talking over almost 30 years ago. Not adjusted for inflation, none of that stuff. I was making more money 30 years ago than they're making doing those jobs today. And it was overtime after 8. It wasn't any of this 40-hour nonsense. And why is that? Well, deregulation. At the end of the day, once you take those regulations away, and it's about picking winners and losers. Deregulation is simply about choosing the wealth class and the connected over everybody else. And until we get that through, in that thing between our ears, we're going to continue to be fleeced. We're going to continue to get ripped off. And the choice banking nonsense, really? Do you think the Republicans who really are in bed with the bankers, do you really think they're going to regulate them? Do you really think that they want to see the end of the boom bust? Donald Trump during the campaign said he was honest. And again, I give Trump credit for at least being honest. It's our fault for not listening, but he was honest. He's the king of debt. You remember, he wanted in a big way to take advantage of the collapse of 2008, because it's what the wealth class does. They gave you a little bit of housing, said, here, you can buy this house. Give us some of your hard-earned money, pay the interest rates all up front. Yes, yes, yes. And then we snatch it back at, about half the price. Then we hold on to a little bit for a little while till the market comes back. Then we sell it back to you. That's what the business class does. It's their belief system. And until we figure that out, and I hope we're there, because I hope we still remember 2008. I know it was a while ago, but I hope we remember that the banking industry in this country, deregulated, almost brought this country to its knees. Now, the wealthy got hurt, yes, a little bit. But they didn't lose their homes. Their kids didn't go hungry. Their kids didn't have to buy secondhand clothes. It was the working poor. It was the working class. It was those people who, were hoping to save a little bit for retirement because they'd taken the defined benefits away and given us these crummy 401ks that, thanks to the collapse, we're 200.5s. They were half of the 401k. In case you need that explained. Until we wake up and go, this is bad for us. The poison these conservatives are peddling, these corporatists are peddling, is bad. It does not help the working class of this country. And yes, I'm going to say there is class war going on. And Warren Buffett is correct. His class is winning. But they shouldn't be. For the short term, we've still outprocreated them. Sure, they have all the money, but there are more of us. If we would just pull our heads out of our keisters and start voting for people who put our economic interests first, maybe, just maybe. And look, I would argue the reason people voted for Trump is they thought that he was going to put their economic interests first. And again, stupid, dumb, duh. A billionaire who cares about a little guy? I'm not buying it. But as a country, some of us did. Now there's got to be that grand awakening, that recovery, that acceptance. It's kind of like the AA thing. It's kind of like, you've got to admit you've got a problem, and then you get to move on from it. At some point, we need that. Honestly, we just need it. And the hope is that, we get there. And we get there together. So call your member of Congress, call early, call often, say, no, this choice nonsense ain't happening. Stop now. Anyway, if you've missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tidal flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming.